Hello, my name is Miguel Gomez. I'm the director of HIV.gov. And we're here today to talk about social media use in 2018. In our public health community, we have two challenges. One, we all don't understand social media. How often are the people we're trying to reach and serve using it? What does it mean to them? The second challenge is we don't all use the data from how people are using social media in our communications planning. And in 2018, that has to change. So I'm so glad you're with us because we're going to be talking about social media use in 2018 and planning. And we're very lucky to have two amazing guests with us. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and we're going to start our conversation. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Stacey Palosky. I'm the Acting Deputy Director for Digital Communications at HHS, and I've been in the digital space, throwing spaghetti against the wall and then learning from it since 1999.
Wow, thank you. Sir?
I'm Rainie, Director of Internet and Technology Research at the Pew Research Center. We self-describe as a fact tank, so I'm not here as a cheerleader for social media, but we do a lot of studies showing how it's grown as a force in our society.
Lee, Stacey and I talked about this. The Pew Research Center just released important data on the use of social media. Can you share what you released and why it's important? And Stacey and I agreed we're going to ask you a lot of questions.
Well, we've been the luckiest social scientists in the history of the planet because we've actually watched 3 technology revolutions occur on our watch. We've been doing this since the year 2000, and our mandate was to understand the impact of these technologies. So we first watched the growth of internet use and broadband use as sort of the first revolution in this digital space. The second thing we studied was the rise of mobile connectivity starting in the mid-21st century of the first decade. And it's inextricably linked to the rise of social media because that's the third revolution. Social media and mobile connectivity came up at the same time and grew together. In many ways, social media made mobile connectivity more attractive. Mobile connectivity made social media much more compelling and much more intimate. So we do these telephone surveys and we get new data. We released just a couple of weeks ago showing, at least for the major platforms, who's using them. At the top of the list is YouTube. 3/4 of Americans use YouTube. We've recently just begun to consider it really a social media platform because there's so much commotion in social commentary and stuff going around YouTube. Facebook sits next on the list. 2/3 of Americans use Facebook. It's a way bigger platform in terms of the size of its population compared with the other major platforms. Instagram is on the rise. It's the picture sharing platform that's now owned by Facebook, but it has a really different character to it since it's really built around pictures and hashtags and lots of fun and selfies. Pinterest is a popular platform, especially with professional women. 29% of Americans now use it, and it's a great how-to site. There are many ways that people use it essentially to learn how to cook, how to prepare meals, how to do fashion things and makeup and things like that. Snapchat has been one of the biggest stories. It's a relatively new service. It's now being used by over 1/4 of all Americans. I've got a slide a little later on showing how dramatically it's grown with young Americans. And it became a popular platform when Facebook began to become popular with middle-aged and older Americans. They all of a sudden, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa wanted to friend Junior. And Junior wasn't too thrilled about that, so Junior stayed on Facebook, didn't abandon it, but then moved over to Snapchat, many of the more intimate, sort of younger people stuff that used to be pretty popular on Facebook, but has now been receding as a form of content on Facebook. LinkedIn, is about 1/4 of the population uses it, really heavy use for professionals, particularly professional men. Twitter sits down there at 24% of the adult population. It's not nearly as big as Facebook. You know, it's not even half as big as Facebook. But Twitter's important to understand, particularly for these audiences, because it is really made up of a lot of people who care about civic life, who care about media life, who care about policy and things like that. It's a pretty challenging space because there's lots of craziness going on in there. But the importance of Twitter is its audience, and they tend to be community influencers as well as policy influencers. And we've begun to ask a lot about WhatsApp because these messaging apps are just crazy popular, starting in the United States, but now around the world.
No, absolutely, and I don't think I can end my evening without using YouTube. So you told us a lot about the most popular platforms. What else is the data telling us about the people who use social media?
We've got a lot of data about the intensity of their use, and we also have a lot of data about the demographic character. So if you go to the pewresearch.org website, you can get all of this demographic information. The slide material that we've got up here now talks about the intensity of use, and you can see more than half of Facebook users consult the site every day, multiple times a day, and another 23% at least once a day. So this is a place where a lot of people hang out for a lot of different purposes. Snapchat is now is popular. It's something that people consult a lot. There are a lot of messages going back and forth between them. Instagram is pretty popular. Twitter and YouTube are on that list. So social media is an everyday thing. And one of the sort of grand stories that we tell with our data is that the special sauce of social media is that people talking to each other. First of all, they don't need media properties and the newspapers, TV stations, or other things to get in the way of human conversation. It also gives people their own capacity to be a broadcaster and a publisher and tell their own stories. Now to get to your particular question about the different character of the platforms, young people in particular are especially likely to use all of them. The number I would call your attention to there is the Snapchat number for those age 18 to 24. 3/4 of people use Snapchat in that age cohort. But it's also, the age story is a really important one throughout the system. And here we tell a socioeconomic story. People who live in households with higher levels of income and people who have higher levels of education are often the most abundant users of social media. So it's an important thing to think about as you're making distinctions among the platforms, that all of them have slightly different demographic audiences and slightly different characters.
Well, thank you. And, Stacey, these numbers, this data is not new to you. You understand these numbers. But why is it important for our public health providers, service providers, to take this data when they're developing their strategies and the way in which they're going to do their work?
So the data, like the Pew data, is the king of how we can plan our communications effectively, right? If you think about the newspaper, and we hoped the newspaper was going to get our information out to people. Now we have data that tells us where our audiences are, what they're using, and we can refine our communications to really hit our target audiences and measure impact on those audiences so that we know that what we're doing is effective. The key is to have a digital-first model where we really design all of our products to reach the audiences where they get their information.
Thank you. Digital first and really understanding where your audience is. When you're sharing, can you also step back and share some of these concepts or examples here at Health and Human Services?
Absolutely. We have so many examples. It started really with CDC and zombie apocalypse. A really viral campaign hit current events, and nation learned a lot about emergency preparedness, and CDC built on it. And it was sort of what I call a spaghetti on the wall approach. Over time, we've really refined what we're doing with digital communications and social media. And some great examples exist at CDC and FDA with their tobacco campaigns, the Tips from Former Smokers and Real Cause, This Free Life, a lot of these campaigns. They all take what I call a 360 approach. And that approach really starts with their data and understanding of their audiences. They do a lot of research about who they want to target, what their impact and behavior change that they want to accomplish are. They create messaging. They test their messaging with those audiences. And then they don't just create again, they look at the analytics of how those messaging and communications are performing, learn from them, take the things that are not working, make them better, push forward the things that are working well, and apply that the next time around. So it really is a full 360 circle.
Yay. Planning, and thinking about what you're doing. And, as I said at the beginning, Lee, we promised you a lot of questions. So, hey, Stacey.
Sure. So, Lee, back to your research. Does the data change depending on the different populations?
Yeah, we see some interesting demographic stories. We also see that people are using multiple platforms. So the data that's up on the screen now captures the way that these platforms have become popular across the board. You'll see that Twitter users also use Facebook, and YouTube users also use Instagram. And one of the challenges for anybody trying to do messaging in this environment is to try to figure out when people are toggling back and forth among the different platforms, and when's the right moment to strike. And there isn't a playbook on this. You just have to keep experimenting and figuring out what kinds of messaging is appropriate for audiences on different platforms. The other thing that we learn on this is that there are folks who use different devices in different ways. So the slide that's up now talks about a new group of users that we've identified in recent years. These are people we call the smartphone dependent. A lot of households don't have broadband or internet connectivity, but the people in that household have a smartphone. It's now 20% of the population.
Wow.
is this smartphone dependent. So in a way, it makes sense. If you're only got enough money for one device or one level of connectivity, the smartphone is like a Swiss Army knife for multiple purposes and multiple formats, and that's probably where people think they most efficiently can spend their money. But this is a number that's been growing. So 20% of the population now fits this smartphone dependent category, but some populations it's an even higher level. So 35% of Hispanics are smartphone dependent. 31% of those who live in households earning less than $30,000 are smartphone dependent. And you can see the other numbers there. So to the degree that you're thinking about populations that have maybe special needs or have special circumstances, thinking smartphone first is a really great strategy, in part because you have to make sure that your material is well adapted to being seen and digested and understood on a small screen. You can invest a lot in a big, elaborate, rich media campaign that shows up great on a big computer monitor. If it doesn't work on a small screen, you're probably not serving your purpose as well.
Yeah, we often will hold up our smartphones in our offices and just be like, okay, how does it work here? And does it load here? And is it loading quickly? Because page load really matters.
The other thing that we see in these data is particularly those who are dependent on their smartphones, they use a lot of Wi-Fi. So they scramble, they hustle, they're really interesting and innovative in getting access to free access to connectivity. But there are times when it's unavoidable that you're drawing down data from cell towers and you're paying for it. And so there are a lot of ways that we see what we call a metered mindset in people. So again, you don't want to create these elaborate, rich videos that are just going to take hours to download and take a lot of bandwidth to consume, because people are going to stop engaging with that content because it's just too expensive for them to sustain. So again, thinking efficiently, get your message out there crisply, make it fun, and understand that on these platforms, the mediating influence is friends. It is not big media organizations like TV stations or newspapers or things like that. You are probably reaching your target audience through their friends. So understanding how people can evangelize for you and vouch for you and speak up in a trusting way for the information that you're providing is a really sort of core part of being successful on social media.
Lee, this information has been amazingly helpful. Where are you going with your next set of data? What's next on your list of research?
We've just begun to understand the role of voice assistants in people's lives. 46% of Americans, so we only asked this question once, and about half the country is already using either echoes like an individual item or voice-activated apps on their phones. So we're going to try to understand the meaning of that, and I think for a lot of the folks in this audience, one of the sort of bank shots that you're going to have to worry about is making sure that your Wikipedia page or the Wikipedia page that is related to your information is in good shape, because a lot of these voice assistants default to Wikipedia, and so devoting some staff time to making sure that it's in good, your Wikipedia page is giving accurate information, providing the best, most reasonable, most timely content to folks is sort of not an obvious thing to do in the voice era, but it's an essential thing to do.
No, absolutely. I can't wait for thumbs to become obsolete.
It's happening very quickly.
Yes, it is. And those folks who are watching really need to step back and think about what their planning should be when they're so overwhelmed often with so much to do, with limited resources. What's one piece of advice, I'll ask you both, that you would like to share with those people who are watching?
I'm going to cheat on the question and give two answers.
Go for it.
The first thing would be to convene a staff meeting or maybe focus group with your youngest staffers, your youngest donors, your youngest volunteers, and ask them about this stuff. Because they'll tell you where they're living in information spaces and how they think about what's different on Snapchat from what's different on Twitter from what's different on Facebook. The other thing is that every organization on the planet has fans and evangelists, and they will give you feedback too. If you again, when you're in testing mode, those people who love you and love what you're trying to do for their community will give you lots of feedback, and they'll probably actually be more honest than folks that don't know you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Ma'am?
So really be real about where your audiences are getting their information. Understand that they may not get their information where you get their information. And so prepare your communications materials with that in mind first and foremost. And then be ready to fail and be okay with failing. Failure is how you learn, how you grow, how you get better, how you start to embrace Snapchat even though your kids don't let you on it, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, you have to crawl before you walk. And for all of us, one of the things that's so important is to realize communication is so much different in 2018. And it's not negotiable. We have to change how we plan and operate. You know, my advice would be, don't be ashamed if you don't understand all the social media platforms. There's ways in which you can learn. I mean, I really encourage everyone to read the Pew Report. It is online. It is clear. There's lots of graphs. It's easy to digest. But at the same time, I really encourage folks, not just because I'm the director of HIV.gov, but if you're working to serve the HIV community or any issue within our public health community, we all need to step back and learn. So I encourage you to go to HIV.gov, our homepage, and subscribe for updates on how to use new media, or even sign up for what we call virtual office hours, in which we can offer you one-on-one technical assistance to better understand the issues we talked about. I really want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time for viewing this or listening to it, and thank both of you for joining us. This is Miguel Gomez for HIV.gov. Thank you.